Not too sure what to talk about today. I've spent the last week editing the novel, so I think maybe I'll start with that. The thing with editing is you get these two sort of opposing feelings that crop up over and over again. First, you read over things that you thought worked and you realize, wow, this really doesn't work. And then you realize you're a worse writer than you thought you were. But then sometimes you read over something you thought was going to have a lot of problems for you to fix, and it's not perfect, but it's good enough that you can make something out of it, and then you realize you're a better writer than you thought. And that flows from, I think, what it means to be a writer. You oscillate between these two extremes of feeling like you're the worst writer and feeling like you're the best writer. And then things will happen that'll either swing you back to the middle in those rare occasions or just shift you completely to the opposite side. So in a week I've done my first read through, started and done the first edit, and I finished the first act so far of the three. It's encouraging to know that I can go through it so quickly, but on another level I'm sort of worried that maybe I don't have the best editing skills, or that I'm not going deep enough. And I mean, to be fair, this is the first read through, so I don't need to go super deep yet, but I'm kind of worried that I'm not going to be a good enough judge of my own writing to make it into what I know it could be. Writing is a lot of slamming your head into the keyboard until something comes out, especially on the harder days. Editing kind of feels like ripping off a band-aid over and over again, putting it back and ripping it off. And it's such a necessary part of the process, because even just on this first read-through, I'm finding so many things where I was either trying to be fancy, so using words and expressions that don't make the most sense just because I want my writing to sound good. Things that structurally don't necessarily work. Characters that from the first few pages of the book are very different than what they ended up becoming. And not in the sense that they grew, but just in the sense that over the course of writing I figured out who they were more. And so earlier in the story you don't have that sense, you don't get those characters, you don't see all their levels yet that they gain over the course of the story. Overall, I was kind of worried that the book would be trash as soon as I would read through it again. That doesn't feel like it's the case, so there's a victory in that. The first draft of my first novel is not complete trash. But I'm always finding myself wondering, does this work? Is this something that people would actually enjoy reading? Because so far I've had good feedback on the concept and the idea, but as we know, ideas are nothing unless the execution is sound. And in the editing, it's what you're trying to figure out. You're trying to figure out the execution of your idea. I mean, I'm only a third of the way into the very first edit, and I'm already wondering if the ending works as it stands right now. There's a lot of things that are still to come over the course of the narrative that I'm wondering if they're going to work out, or how much of an overhaul this thing's going to need. Because right now I'm worried because I haven't seen the need for a very big overhaul yet, and I feel like that's wrong, though I can't put my finger on why. I mean, I guess that's what professional editors are for. They have this impartial view of your writing, ideally, so that they can better pick out the flaws and help you transform it into something much better than what you first came up with. I've been thinking a lot about publishing lately as well. I mean, as much as I try to stay focused on the task at hand, my mind can't help but wander into the future, into imagining what publishing this thing and being an author would be like. It's hard not to have expectations. You want your book to succeed, you want the things you do to succeed, and you want yourself to succeed. I was thinking mostly about going to a traditional publisher, mostly because self-publishing involves a lot of work and you need a lot of skills that I don't necessarily have. You need to market the crap out of your book yourself. You need to navigate the different platforms that you want to sell on. You need to navigate printing the book if you want to sell printed copies. You're sort of this one-man team who has to do everything yourself. And then I thought with a traditional publisher was the other way around, that you wrote the book and then they take care of the rest. But in doing some research, I found out that that's not necessarily the case. Because as much as we all think or would like to wish that we are going to be bestsellers, publishers know that that's not the case. So they're not necessarily going to put all the big marketing guns behind your book. So at the very least, there's still a bunch of marketing and self-promotion that you have to take care of personally. Add on top of that the fact that the publisher gets the say in different things, from how the cover is to how the marketing is going to work. And then add to that the fact that your royalties are maybe 10 to 15% on each book sold, whereas they're much higher in the self-published world. And traditional publishing looks a lot less like a good deal. I can't tell if it's because they're behind the times, stubbornly so, in that they don't realize the power of the self-publishing platforms that authors have access to now, or it's because the exposure and the platform you get from them is so powerful and so valuable that they don't really need to give you much more for you to get value out of them. Because as platforms and technology changes, you have a lot of these old school companies and people who refuse to change and sort of fight to keep their hold on whatever they have. And I'm wondering if that's where traditional publishers are right now, or if it's really just a matter of them having such powerful platforms that even if you subject yourself to their terms, it's an incredibly advantageous thing to do. So I thought I had that situation figured out. I mean, before I even started writing the book, I thought to myself, well, there's no way I'm going to self-publish this. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of this, a lot of that, and I'd rather deal with all the rejection letters. But now I'm more on the fence. I think I'm still leaning more towards traditional publishing, but self-publishing is starting to seem more and more like a worthwhile endeavor despite the amount of work involved. I don't know when this thing's going to get published. It's a very long process, I realize. I don't know how long the edit's going to take. I don't think it's something I'll ever be satisfied with. I think that's how editing works. You just keep hacking away at it and try to find the point where you can stop before you start making things worse. One thing I'm very much looking forward to is having a draft that I feel confident enough to give to beta readers. Try to get some good feedback, constructive or otherwise, on what I've written. It'll be a good, very sobering thing, I think, to strange thing, because on one level I don't really care what people think, in the sense that I'm gonna write what I want to write always, but at the same time I sort of need their feedback, and I value their feedback, since it can help me improve the product as a whole, but also figure out my own blind spots. You know, if, for example, I'm particularly attached to a certain character and they can sort of get away with anything when I write them, and then a beta reader will look at them and say, yeah, this person doing this is really shitty, or is this, or is that, then I can realize, oh yeah, that doesn't work in the story. I kind of let that get away from me. Writing is hard. If I've learned anything since November, it's that writing is hard. When you do it properly, it's very hard, because I have this sense that so many people call themselves writers, and it's one of the reasons why I had so much trouble doing it for so long, calling myself a writer, because so many people call themselves writers, but they don't actually write. They'll write once a month, they'll write once a year, whatever, and they have nothing finished to point at. I think forcing myself to have the self-discipline to treat writing like a job, which involves writing every day, now involves editing every day, and making sacrifices for the art. I don't know, even as I say it, it feels elitist, it feels snobbish to say. Maybe I just wish that everyone who had a dream, be it writing or anything else, was willing to make those sacrifices to make it happen. Because I feel everyone has something they want to do. Everyone wants something in their situation to change, but I think so few are willing to do what needs to be done that they just never end up reaching their dreams or their goals. And I mean, that's one of the things that drives me, and once you realize that, it's sort of impossible to not be driven, because the way I look at it is this: every hour I spend on something that's not writing for every hour I spend doing something that's not writing, I'm pushing back my success an hour more. For every dollar I spend towards something other than writing, that's a dollar I'm borrowing from my own future. I mean, borrowing money and time from your future is worse than credit card debt, because there's no way to pay that back. Your time is finite. Your money is finite. Even a mega billionaire like Bill Gates has a finite amount of money. So realize that while you don't have to be working every waking moment, and you can take some time off, and you can have a hobby, you can have friends, all the time and money that goes towards these things is being taken away from your future. And the more time you spend now fucking around and doing this and that, the further away your future gets. And I'm not perfect. Never going to claim that. And if I ever claim that I'm perfect, you'll know I'm full of shit and I've sold out. But every day that I don't write, I feel that. I can feel my future sort of slipping ever so slowly out of my grasp. And it comes with a lot of guilt, which is not the healthiest way to go about it. And that's something that I look forward to fixing over the near future. But that feeling of willingly pushing your future away, the future you want, the future you dream about, and the future you keep sacrificing for, the feeling of pushing that further away is one of the worst feelings imaginable. that because you want to watch that episode of that show, or you want that fancy thing, that you're willing to sacrifice time at the finish line for that. It's indescribable. You're cheating yourself, and you feel like you're cheating yourself, and you'll do so much to make sure that feeling doesn't come again. And it's about being accountable for yourself. It's about taking responsibility. It shouldn't be about guilt, and I think that's maybe the first step of this sort of process. You sort of start out, and I'm starting out with feeling the guilt whenever I push the future away, but as time goes on, I think I'm going to do my best to reorient towards the responsibility, the accountability, more so than the guilt. It's about realizing, yeah, shit, I shouldn't have done that, or yeah, I fucked up, more so than, oh wow, I'm a liar, I'm a fraud, I'm this, I'm that. There's a lot of name calling that goes into it. We're our harshest critics. Even complete narcissists who on the outside don't seem like they ever criticize themselves are the harshest critics that they can have. As far as negative things go, there's not much you can say to a person that they haven't already thought themselves. And I think the reason those things hurt so much when we hear them is not because they come out of nowhere, but because they reinforce an idea we already held about ourselves. So to sort of sum that pile of word vomit up, if you want to do what needs to be done to be great, to have great things in your life, you have to realize that every minute and every dollar spent towards something other than these great things you desire is pushing them out of your reach. And that doesn't mean that every dollar, every minute absolutely needs to be spent towards those endeavors in order for them to be realized. Some people do that, and they will probably reach those things sooner than you will, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with those people getting there earlier. There's nothing wrong with you, whether it's taking a day off or, buying something that you like. There's nothing wrong with that. Just be aware of the sacrifice you're making to have those things. And be aware that if you make too many of them, maybe you won't get those, maybe you won't reach that goal that you have. And it's not a matter of, oh, I took 2 days off this week versus one, or oh, I spent, $600 on a watch instead of $300. It's not quite that micro. It's more about the habits that you develop. If you're buying things every other week, or if you're never working, then you're never going to reach your goal. And then if you work half the time and save your money half the time, it's going to be a lot easier to reach your goal. But if you work all the time and you spend very little of your money, then you have the best shot of reaching it. Anyway, I've made it to work now. Just remember your future. Remember what you want. Keep it in focus. And don't borrow too much, because it's going to catch up with you. Take care of yourselves.